Well, we are very blessed this morning to have Barbara Scott with us. Of course, she's always with us. But especially today, but when you're not. And she's going to be speaking on the metaphysics of place, a mystical human rights practice. Barbara is starting her second term as president of the Board of Trustees of the Unitarian Congregation of Taos. She is a writer and editor who moved here from Denver 15 years ago. She received her master's degree from St. John's in Santa Fe, and it was there that she made the acquaintance of Aristotle. So if you'd all just give a really big, warm welcome to Barbara Scott.
Thank you, everybody. Hello. Hello. Good morning, everybody. It's so great to see so many friends. Gosh. I got to take stock of who all is here. It's so awesome. And thank you, David and Sally, for coming and filming this. Okay, so everybody I see is in their place, and there has been a place for everyone, and that's the topic of this talk, because it's kind of all about place, and I hope you don't mind that word, because you're really going to hear a lot of it today. I think I'd like to start with a guided visualization, if you're okay with that. Mostly, I want you to experience a couple of concepts that I'm going to introduce later in the talk. And I have to assume that since you've come to a lecture on mysticism, that you're probably going to be okay with that. I'd like to make it clear that I created this practice over time just to help me see beyond the embodied person, the person with flesh and bones and an ego personality, and to see beyond my own embodied personality, ego personality. So it's really been helpful, but I want you to know that it's no one else's reality but my own. You're free to borrow it if you want to, but don't think that I'm saying this is the way it should look. It's not the way it should look, it's the way it looks for me. So if you're ready, then uncross your legs and close your eyes and relax. Let go of anything that you might still be fretting about this morning. Concentrate on just being still. Rest your hands comfortably in your lap. Take some slow, deep breaths, and imagine the oxygen lighting up arterioles as it travels down to the tips of your toes. Be aware of yourself as you sit in your place. Feel your arms and legs as they touch the chair, the soles of your feet as they rest on the ground. Now move your perception slightly backward and upward so you can see yourself as if from the outside. We'll call this outer vision self-awareness. From that place of seeing yourself from the outside, draw an imaginary ribbon of light to encircle your whole body from the top of your head, down along your neck, shoulders, arms, legs, under your feet, and up the other side to complete the circle at the top of your head. This we'll call the halo of consciousness. Now focus the breath so that the oxygen is breathing light and energy into this halo. With each inhalation, the halo enlarges a bit. Think of it as an image of Our Lady of Guadalupe. The Virgin is central, but she has a halo of light around her. I like to think we all have this halo of light. Every person on earth, not just the saints, and that it's our connection to the divine. And don't forget to turn off your cell phones. Now open your eyes and return to the room and try to try to remember those later, if you can, because we'll touch on them later. So I'm fairly sure that all of you have heard or seen or learned about something really fascinating that you couldn't quit thinking about. And for me, it was Aristotle's physics. And I just thought that it was a beautiful look, a beautiful way of looking at the physical world. And he was just innocently, curiously trying to define physical concepts of such as the void and place, time and movement, change. Those are really hard abstract concepts to try to define if you're an ancient Greek philosopher or anybody. If we had tried to take a stab today without building on the foundation of people like him and Newton and everybody else, it would be pretty darn hard for us, I think. The first time I read it, I was taken by it, and so I haven't really quite let it go. And I picked it up again recently. And the two concepts that caught my attention the most in graduate school were Aristotle's ideas about time and place. And in fact, I think, specifically the meaning of now and the meaning of place. And I think that's why I got an A- in that class on philosophy of science, because the tutor who I had my orals with didn't like my definition of now. He didn't like the way I saw Aristotle as seeing now. Aristotle was trying to come up with what is now. It's like you can't grasp it, you can't touch it, you can't stop it, you can't slow it down. And my tutor wanted me to see that it was just all relative. Your perceptions of time are different than my perceptions of time. And of course we all know that, that's true. But that I didn't think was what Aristotle was getting at. So also place was really fascinating to me. And so today we're just going to focus on place. Aristotle starts talking about place by saying, kind of charmingly, quote, "The idea that existing things exist somewhere is universally accepted." But what is place? The question is beset with difficulties. It's great. I love that way, that approach to writing, that approach to understanding something. You come out with a problem when you just say, I don't understand this, but I know there's something. He says that there is such a thing as place, but the place has a certain power. Place has a certain power? If it does, what is that power? To me, it means that it's dynamic and movable and changeable. And we're not used to thinking of place that way. We're used to thinking of place as something geographic and fixed. And I think even Aristotle knew that it wasn't. So when I read this again last year, I started reading it in April again last year, and I've been sort of writing about it ever since then. I started thinking about people who are in their place and about those who are not in their place. In this era of mass migration, people have become so desperate that they're willing to uproot their families and leave the place of their birth to find a place that's hopefully more benign. Migrants may be hundreds, even thousands of miles from their homelands. But if you think about it, they're still in their place. The way I see it, their place isn't their country or even their body, but the space their body occupies. No one can take their place. Can everyone hear me okay? Is there anybody that can't hear me? Okay. So no one can take their place. Someone can shove them aside or put out the straight arm and say, you have to stop here and you can't come over this line. But they cannot take their place. Their place goes with them wherever they go. The only way one person can take another's place is to kill them and then remove their body leaving a void. Aristotle says that void is probably place deprived of body. Let's do a little experiment. I'm going to take my paper with me. Everybody look at me. Each one of you is occupying a different place. Two seats never overlap in any way. And because of those different places you're occupying, each of you has a different perspective on me. It's not a right perspective or a wrong perspective, it's just a different perspective. And in that way, it is all relative. Now, if I step a foot or two to my left, you're right, you each have a new perspective on me. So as I move, even though you're stationary, our perspectives both change. Yours of me and mine of you. But my place has not changed. Because I brought my place with me when I moved over here. And now I'm going to move my place back over here behind the lectern. My place isn't behind the lectern. It's wherever I am. And so if it's over here, but it doesn't mean it's my permanent place. We have a place that we bring with us wherever we go. That's one of the powers of place. We're seeing each other relative to our own position, but our own place has not changed. It can't change. Aristotle says every perceptible body is in place. Every perceptible body is in place. That means everything is where it should be. It just suggests a kind of orderliness, doesn't it? To think that every perceptible body is in place. It means that, like the proverb states, every person, every animal, fish, tree, rock, etc., has a place. They're not just a body or an object to be stopped or chased down or cut down, but beings in their place. For some, it's a palace, or one of several palaces, or hotels, golf clubs, or government housing on Pennsylvania Avenue. Others may have only one small home, with or without a yard. Still others have only a place in a caravan of migrating humanity, all with the hope in their hearts that they will find welcome at their destination. But despite their movement, they still have a place, and their place is wherever they are. These migrants move northward at 5 or 10 miles a day, but they are still each one in their place, and their place is moving in tandem with others, all of whom are seeking a safer, better place to live their lives. Otherwise, they would not have abandoned their country, their place of origin, their ancestry. Instead of thinking about what they'll gain from being in the United States, let's empathize and think of the sacrifice that they've made to get here. Even in movement, people need a place, and they must be assured a place to be while they're in transit. This guarantees them a sense of security and safety on their journey and in their life, which creates calm for everyone and even generates a sense of freedom, probably Americans' highest value. Consider traffic. If we didn't respect each other's right to be in their place, even when that place is in motion, you'd have non-stop car crashes on the road, which would most likely lead to road rage, and someone would be armed because it's their right, and others would get killed, which means they'd be deprived forever of their place. And the person who did the shooting would go to jail, severely limiting his own freedom. Simple politeness is key here. Just politeness. You respect my right to be on the road, and I'll respect yours. That privilege of place or the right to the space that my body occupies, goes with me wherever I go. So by analogy, in a caravan of thousands of Hondurans and Guatemalans, for example, migrating north through Mexico toward the United States, each of them are bringing their place along with them. They are constantly in their place, and their place is also on the move. But it is still their place. What if we treated this as a reality instead of just a thought experiment? Aristotle said, the most common and most fundamental kind of change is change of place, which is known as movement. How would we treat a few thousand migrants who walked in a column all the way from Central America to the border between Mexico and the United States to escape violence and poverty in their country, knowing how heartbreaking it would be for us to leave the land of our birth? Would we put our hand in their face and say, go back, you don't belong here, you have no place here? If we did, we'd be wrong, because they, of course, have a place. The proof is right there in front of us. They have brought their place with them all these 2,000 plus miles. When you look at place in this way, there's no such thing as a border. A border is only the contrived ego statement of a nation. And it delineates how that nation feels about being more privileged than those who were born in another nation. That's why some people desperately want to build a wall, because a wall protects privilege and makes it much harder to get through to the side of opportunity. But what's up with the people who are so, well, I don't want to say selfish, but it is kind of selfish to try to keep others from enjoying the freedom and opportunity that they themselves essentially take for granted, simply because they were born on the enviable side of an invisible line. How can they talk about this amongst themselves without feeling deeply ashamed? Talk about a trade imbalance. We could be exporting freedom, opportunity, and security. These are things that we have in our history that we know something about. Instead, we hoard it for ourselves, which makes it toxic. As we can all see right now today, the border is a toxic place because it's just like dams. We've finally learned that dams are not a good idea because the water needs to flow. The water needs to flow back to Mombasa, as it says in Out of Africa. And if you don't let it flow, it stops it up, and it also makes it toxic. And that's what's happening at our border now. We create crises at the border, but the only real crisis is that poor people are threatening our privilege. Tired, poor, huddled masses yearning to breathe free are scaring the hell out of us because our president keeps telling us we should be scared. A place for everything and everything in its place. Just thinking those words, especially when trying to organize a junk drawer, settles the mind into its own feeling of orderliness, of calm, even reverence for each individual item, because it's in its place, it belongs. My gosh, how different things would be if we thought of every person that way. Not just the people we know who are in our same income and educational level, who are the same race and ethnicity as we are. And not that they should be put in their place or should stay in their place, but that they ought to be allowed to find the habitat that best suits the place that is naturally theirs as human citizens of the earth. And that everyone around them ought to give them the proper respect and accord to allow them to move safely and always feel that there is a place for them. It should be a fundamental human right, freedom of movement. This sounds radical and maybe even dangerous. But we do it every time we interact with other humans. Whenever we walk down a sidewalk with pedestrians traveling in both directions, when we shop in a grocery store or any store with other customers and with clerks and store employees, we recognize each person as someone who has a place. Sure, another customer can step in front of you and say, the produce department, to grab the most perfectly ripe avocado in the bin, but that's definitely the exception. In fact, I'm an inveterate shopper of avocados, and I can't remember it ever happening. A driver can cut you off in traffic, but they haven't literally cut you off. It means they've not accepted and respected your right of place. It's indecent to treat someone as if they don't exist. It isn't the close call that makes us angry. It's the disrespect. For the most part, though, people abide by the laws of traffic. The majority of people also abide by the unwritten rules of respect and the natural law of physics. One-on-one, individuals are pretty good at being cordial and recognizing each other's right to be in their place and to sometimes share that space with another. Think of the self-imposed choreography of Taos drivers who allow others to enter the chain of traffic in a variety of ways through flashing headlights, a wave of the hand, or simply by slowing to create space. This attitude of generosity and space-making is really important. We need to have a mindset of space-making, a heart set of space-making. This attitude of generosity and space-making signals the decency of the people who live here. Instead of our saying, well, that's the way people ought to behave, we should be saying, this is a miracle. Animals on the land moving and being considerate of each other and thoughtful and making room for each other. And it happens every day. Usually, the rights of movement in the public sphere are conferred through primacy of first arrival. A good example in traffic is the four-way stop. The first to arrive is the first to proceed. And then they have to revert to a second law, and first on the right, or the one on the right goes. But the first law there is the primacy of place. You arrive first, you go first. I'm sorry about this frog. Oh yeah, water would be great. Thank you, Gail. Maybe that'll help. While you worry about that, I'll proceed. Even little children know this law of primacy of place. Because you probably said it yourself. I was here first. Everybody knows that, right? They understand this instinctively. Thank you, Drew. And if you're testing the firmness of that avocado, and a stranger comes up and reaches under your arm to get at the avocado right next to the one you're testing, you will be offended. And that's because they're encroaching on your space. And it hardly ever happens. But when it does, or if it would happen, it would rightly be looked on as an act of rudeness. This usurpation of space, of place, almost never happens in daily life, though. You're more likely to notice, if you're the first to arrive at that scenario, that someone else needs to sample the avocados. And you will either hurry up and finish, or if you need more time, you'll signal by scooting over, or through body language, or even eye contact, that you are aware of their presence and are willing to share that space. If you signal a little more consciously, say by actually looking them in the eye, which is very scary to people, you can access a state of transformation. That's probably why it's so scary. Not just a state of transformation for yourself, but for the other person. You regard that person even for a second or two and silently acknowledge that they have a place. You willingly relinquish the primacy of your position. Even though you were first to arrive, you say, in essence, that's okay, I can see that you are a person who has a place here and who is respectful. Feel free to share this space with me. We can both work around each other. This, I would say, describes grace bestowed by and on everyday people, whether they are deserving or not. If every person were accorded that respect for their place in the world, it would not only reassure every person that they belonged, but it would transform every person involved in the interaction. If we treated all people with a kind of gentle acquiescence, which could be translated to polite acceptance of their presence, it would change the world. Governments would quit oppressing their citizens because freedom of movement and being would be the highest natural law of any land. And protecting this right as a primary mission of leadership would feel noble and less terrifying to those who were trying to maintain order. People could cross borders in freedom. Fear alone is at the root of stopping them. Fear of the unknown, fear of others who do not look, think, or speak like us, others who don't share our history. But that doesn't make them inherently dangerous. The danger is in our minds. It's through relationship that fear and danger dissolve. Respect and kindness act like solvents on both. Each person alive on earth can only take one place, their place. So why are some people allowed to occupy so much space for their one place? There was a time when private property wasn't even a concept. But now those who have accumulated great wealth can afford huge amounts of space in which they can feel safe from encroachment by others who are not only deemed less worthy, but are treated as if they were less worthy. Yet these people, whose worth is truly measured in dollars, these people have just one place. And when they die, they take their place with them, at least metaphysically. And that's all they take with them. The very wealthy aim to protect their place even in death and long after they are able to occupy it. So they have children to take their place. But these children have not earned that place. And besides, the parent does them a great disservice by not allowing them to find their own place in the world. It can only be greed or fear or vanity that makes one man feel the need to accumulate so much wealth and space to surround his place. Holding more private property than is rationally needed for human comfort and a sense of security defies the laws of nature and obstructs the natural flow. The deeper one's sense of personal worthlessness or insecurity, the greater the need to create a sizable footprint. And I am talking about the 1% here. I'm not talking about people who own a house or even a summer house. So the greater the need to create a sizable footprint of visibility and safety, whether through accumulating wealth and property or by building Ozymandias-type monuments to one's ego. But no matter how inflated a man's sense of self-worth, His place is no bigger, better, or more expansive than anyone else's. It bears repeating. When he dies, he takes his place with him, just like the poorest immigrant. And there's the reference to that guided visualization. If you'll remember back, Aristotle says that place is not a vessel that happens to be holding a body. So why do I say that people are in their place? Their body is a vessel, certainly, but there is also what I've come to think of as that halo of consciousness. And that halo of consciousness surrounds their body, our bodies. Remember that you imagined it as an illuminated outline around your body that we can think of as a vessel of consciousness? It carries us from our first memories to the end of our days with the knowledge that we are still the same person at 80 as we were at 8. Even though biologically and cellularly we aren't. So place is a property of physics, but it is not a physical property. I would say that it's more a metaphysical property, and thus the title. We can't trade our halos of consciousness with others any more than we can trade places with them. But we can make a practice out of seeing others, all others, as living inside a beautiful halo, a beautiful glowing halo of consciousness. We all have a connection to the divine, even the worst among us. So we all have those halos of consciousness, and paradoxically, they are best activated when we recognize them in others. When we acknowledge that consciousness in others, it enlarges our own. Eckhart Tolle in Stillness Speaks says, quote, "Attention is primordial intelligence, consciousness itself. It joins the perceiver and the perceived in a unifying field of awareness. It is the healer of separation." Close quote. Seeing people as not just bodies on the planet at the same time as you are, but rather as people in their place, dignifies them and gives them a kind of gravitas. Each person deserves to be acknowledged as worthy simply because they are in their place. If we thought of that as a fundamental human right, not a citizen's right, we would have to admit that the US and most countries have a pretty abysmal human rights record. To look away from someone, to overlook their presence, is almost as hurtful as denying them their freedom of movement. The most loving thing we can do for another is to dignify their presence by witnessing it with kind acceptance. This is a radical spiritual practice, the practical application of the Buddhist philosophy of loving kindness. It's a compassion practice that gives us a direct method of feeling more compassionate. It's the manifestation of the New Testament verse, God is love. God and love in this practice are synonymous. God is not an old man with a long white beard, resting in a throne on a cloud somewhere in the sky. At least I don't think he is, but everybody has their own concept of God, and that's the thing that the Unitarians believe is proper and fitting, that you all have your own concept of God, because God is malleable. In this case, God is love. Love itself. And love is the God of all things, large and small. To adopt this as a spiritual practice is effortless. It costs us nothing to think of every human being as possessing a kind of nobility. When we feel this way, it's easy to look at all others as if they matter, because they do. They are formed of matter, and each has a spirit. Just witnessing them is a loving act. Witness is a form of love. Love is light. And each one of us has the potential to be a charged particle of that light. In some of us, the light may feel extinguished. It's not, it's just kindling. In others, it's active and alive and moving through the world, lighting up everything in its path. Each one of us can be that light, can activate those particles just by allowing people to be who they are. It's an alchemical process. You let them be who they are, and suddenly you're both transformed. If we loved one another, it would be very hard to hurt one another. But telling someone to love a stranger or their enemy is a waste of time, because too many of us don't even love our friends and families, not to mention ourselves. A more achievable practice is to witness one another with kindness, to acknowledge their presence as gently as possible, to respect them for doing a job only they can do, and that is to be in their place. When we bring our own agitation to stillness and just witness, that's how we learn to love. It's easier than we think. You don't have to go to the border or to Syria or Libya to try out these concepts and see how mystical it is to put them in place. It is a mystical experience, a mystical experience, according to lexicographers. I thought I'd give you the dictionary definition. Involves or has the nature of a direct, subjective communion with God or ultimate reality. Every time we personally witness someone and acknowledge them as exactly who they are and who they need to be to fulfill their destiny, there is the potential for a mystical experience. Thomas Merton said, "When you see God in everyone, then they see God in you." Mother Teresa spoke of those she took care of, the desperately ill and poor, as God in all his troubling disguises. No matter how troubling their disguise, they are on the same journey as you and me, from birth to death. They have just chosen a different path, perhaps a more challenging one than ours, but that's to be admired. On the 50th anniversary of Robert Kennedy's assassination, I listened to NPR's StoryCorps. Juan Romero, the busboy, remember him, who cradled Robert Kennedy's head after he was shot, said he had met the senator and presidential candidate earlier that day when he brought breakfast to Kennedy's hotel room in Los Angeles. Quote, "You could tell he was looking at you. He's not looking through you. He's taking you into account." I felt about 10 feet tall, close quote. That was Juan Romero, 50 years later, reflecting on what it felt just to be acknowledged. And it was not because Kennedy was famous, but because it was apparent that he regarded all human beings as worthy. When we can do that for everyone we meet, there are plenty of occasions to witness another's place right here in Taos, right here in this room. Test it on your spouse or partner. Don't do it here. Looking at each other makes people uncomfortable sometimes. Test it on your spouse or partner, your closest friends, strangers doing business, the person at the street corner selling copies of the Taos News, and think of it as they who are giving you the opportunity to put these values into practice. You don't have to tell people what you're doing. Just try to see that halo around them. And don't say, "You know what, I see your halo around you." In this era of mass migration, the kindest thing to do for those whose places are in transition is to create a welcoming space for them to feel safe and accepted in their place, which by now we can see is the equivalent of our own. No better, but no worse. If we aren't in a position to create physical space for them, we can at least create space in our hearts and minds. That alone will make a difference. So if anybody has any comments or questions, I'd love to hear them.
Let me bring the microphone to you.
When you talk about, is that okay? When people die and they leave their place, it reminded me of a story from Lawrence Vanderpost, who was an African hunter, and he described what it felt like to kill an elephant. And he said when the elephant died, there was this massive empty space that just was shocking.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Hannah.
I just had a request. Could you read the beginning quote again about place?
Aristotle's.
At the very beginning of your talk, from Aristotle. It was in the very beginning.
Well, let me see.
You opened with it.
I opened with it? No, because I opened with everyone take your place. I think it's this one. Is it this? The idea that existing things exist somewhere is universally accepted. But what is place? The question is beset with difficulties. Is that the one?
Yeah. One more time.
The idea that existing things exist somewhere is universally accepted. But what is place? The question is beset with difficulties. Did you have a question or a comment? Okay. Is that all? Oh, yeah.
Always.
I always have something to say.
Yeah, good.
When you were talking about witnessing, and it reminded me of how important it is to be seen. And so it's kind of the same thing, that when somebody or something has a place, you can see that.
Yeah, yeah. One day, Mimi came to church. It was on a Sunday of a sharing circle. And she just looked happy. She looked happy to be here. And I said, "Hi, Mimi, it's so good to see you." And she said, "It's good to be seen." And I said, "It is good, isn't it?" And she said, "Yeah, it makes you feel like you matter." Sorry, I just shared that personal story between us. But I think that's so true. Just being seen, just being acknowledged. It's hugely powerful. I mean, it is earth-swayingly powerful to see other people in their place and to be seen. Oh.
I would add to that.
Hold that up so everybody can hear it.
I would add to that we need to see the children, because if you're not seen as a child, it's harder and harder to be seen as an adult.
That is such a great point. It's so true. That is such a good practice, just to see everybody as a child. Forget the halo, forget all of that, and just see what they must have been like as a tiny child. And all the people, even the people that you don't like, especially the people that you don't like, try to see them as a tiny child before they got all messed up. And it's a little easier. All right, well, thank you. Oh, Bob.
One of the concerns I think that we see expressed is the impact that social media has on interactions, and would you make the case that in some way social media takes place away or shifts it in a way that damages relationships?
I would have to agree with that. Yeah, because you see how nasty people are on social media. Nobody is that nasty in person. Even those nasty people who are trolls, if they go to the grocery store, they're not the same person when they go to the grocery store as they are on social media. And you know, cars also prohibit us from seeing each other in their place. You have to one lady pulled out in front of me one day on my way over here, in fact, and everybody was going 35 miles an hour on Paseo del Mangreg. It was all going nice and smooth, and then she pulled out in this lowrider Lincoln Continental, like from 1980, and went 15 miles an hour. And I, you know, went through all sorts of annoyance in my mind until I finally settled on she's in her place, doing the best she can. And then I backed off to give her more space. And when I backed off, I was the one who felt the blessing. It was very strange. It was a misplaced blessing, because she's the one that I was trying to give her space to make her feel comfortable, and instead I'm the one who got to feel all sorts of comfort. It's a gift that you give to yourself. But yeah, social media is not helping.
I'm over here with the
Oh,
microphone.
okay.
just in response to that, another way of seeing her is to see that she probably never got anyone to see her place in her childhood, and now she had to insist that she be seen by going against the grain.
You never know, or either that or she just didn't see me coming. Because she's like, you know, lower than the steering wheel.
So I just wanted to remark that very few of us here today were born in this place. But we came here, and I've been here 23 years, and I've watched people. I came, I stayed, I've watched people come. Some stay, some don't. But the one thing I think we all share is, and I believe that people that were born here have always honored Taos as a healing place, and they allow people to come to heal or to get away from the mainstream or to do something different. And I think we're very, very fortunate to be in this community in northern New Mexico and be safe and accepted here. It's a wonderful thing, and I hope we all recognize that blessing today.
Thank you, Barbara, for saying that.
I just want to call our attention to the fact that we have a lot of space here in which to claim our place. There are parts of the world that are very crowded, very crowded. I've been there, I've felt very uncomfortable, frightened, threatened, even though I am aware of the fact that they can't take my place. But I'm used to having that space in which to claim it. Also, the rules are very different in different places. People have a very different sense of what it is to intrude on somebody's space. And being aware of those rules is really hard work. So I can see that it could be I can understand how it can be very threatening and challenging for people to think about what might change, how they might respond to a situation where people don't have that space in which to claim their place.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I thought of when I was writing this piece, or after I finished writing. It's not just fear of the other, it's fear of running out of resources, running out of space, fear of being crowded. I used to have crowd phobia, and I understand it. I know how it feels. It's not pleasant. But that's why I'm talking about this is a mental heart thing, creating space. Because if we can do that in our hearts and minds, it's going to be a lot easier to find a way to do that physically.
So,
Eileen. Oh, sorry.
Mike's over here.
I have the mic.
Oh. Okay. She has the talking stick. I'm sorry.
I just want to thank you for bringing out this kind of idea that psychic space and territorial space often can overlap in us, sometimes to our detriment and sometimes to other people's detriment, but I think it's a really, really useful concept, and I just want to thank you for bringing it to us.
Oh, thank you, Jane.
You're welcome. Did someone else want that?
Eileen.
Thank you, Joe. I just wanted to say, when I first moved here to Taos, I moved from Boston, where there's so much anonymity and consequently a lot of road rage and bad driving. And I remember coming up Paseo and cutting somebody off. I made a left to get into the Albertsons parking lot, and you know, I didn't think anything of it, but I had a chance to see the person who I was cutting off, and I was behind them in line at the store, and that was a really important first lesson for me. It's like, oh, you can't do that here because you're not anonymous here, and I didn't even know the person. It didn't matter. They will see. I see that it's community.
That's a great point. Don't be anonymous. Oh, and there's somebody over here. Oh, she's been waiting.
Thank you. I'm going to go back a couple of questions to try to challenge the common view of social media and whether it's helpful or not.
Yeah.
Social media to me is a tool. You can use a hammer to build a wall. You can also use a hammer to tear a wall down. And social media is a tool like any other tool. You can use it in many, many different ways, and without belaboring the point, just to give one example, consider what social media can mean as it means to some of my friends, to people who are disabled and homebound, and who have very little opportunity to go out and be seen physically in the world. This creates a space for them where they can generate a safe space to be seen by their friends and to communicate with them. And that is of enormous value. It gives them a chance to be seen and to have their place when otherwise they're denied the place by the walls of their own home. So I just like to say social media can be a lot of different things, and some of them may be ugly, but some of them are very beautiful.
There you go. Thank you.
Yes, those of you who know me know that I'm not shy about expressing my opinions. And when I've done that, I have from time to time had somebody who's been in this place for a long time say to me, "How long have you been here?" It used to offend me because it sounded to me like they were challenging my standing, my right to be in this place. But I've come to hear it differently. I've come to understand it differently. As if they were really saying to me, "How long will you be in this place?" I will be here for a long time. Will you remain?
Last night I had a need for some things that I could get at Walmart. So I get in my car and I'm thinking about the things I need and where to get them in Walmart, because everything's a mystery lately to me. where we have everything. But anyway, so I was absorbed in trying to find the items I needed. And a winsy older man, not ill-dressed, not, came up to me and wanted to talk to me. Well, fortunately, he didn't have any teeth, and I can't hardly hear, so the lisping was difficult. So I sort of shrugged and I tried to tell him, I really can't understand what you're saying, but then he started saying, "Oh, do you like basketball?" And I just saw Texas Tech, where I lived in Lubbock when, So I go to another place together, and he comes and follows me there. And so here, my space is the house and thing that I'm moving to Walmart to try to get my needs met, and his space is I want to just talk. I'm old. I'm desperate. He 3 times, probably through Walmart, and when I was trying to find 3 different things, which was hard to start doing in the first place.
Well, Don, you're a Jesus freak, right?
What?
Aren't you the one that said you're a Jesus freak atheist?
I can't hear you.
Didn't you? I'm trying to whisper. Didn't you tell me once you were a Jesus freak atheist?
Yes.
Yeah.
Jesus freak atheist.
Yeah. Well, that reminds me of the story, of Jesus saying, "Whenever you see of the least among you, that's me." And so that guy was like, "Come on, I'm giving you a chance."
Well, okay, and so I did not give him a chance. I bought the things. I really never got engaged.